But I'm hopeful that this serves as an example, right, of what's possible. That, the story I told about, the judge telling someone to sit down and how that was such a huge deal. That actually gives me hope, right, because it tells me that the Kenyan people are watching it and saying, oh, this woman, a woman judge no less, was able to put this defendant in his place. I think that if people see that the prosecution actually going forward and people being held responsible, I'm hopeful that they will be more likely to demand similar justice at home. And in Kenya, I think that will involve, for the most part, prosecution. But I think justice is much broader than just that. Some of the other work that I've done deals with restorative justice, kind of looking at the idea that, in the United States we have a very narrow notion of justice. You prosecute them and you throw them in jail for as long as possible, and perhaps you kill them too. That's kind of the spectrum of justice in most U.S. systems, right? But if we look at systems worldwide, justice is much broader than that, right? So we look at South Africa, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was not focused on prosecution, it was focused on truth-telling, on compensation, and on reconciliation through many different means. So I'm hopeful that if there's some actual accountability with some of the most high-profile people in Kenya, that will spark some actual work in the rest of the Kenyan system. One thing I will note, though, is that, as I mentioned, two of these defendants are currently running for president, and the presidential election is probably going to be taking place around the same time that the trial starts before the ICC. Interestingly, the two people who are running for president that I mentioned, I just read yesterday that they're actually planning on pairing up as presidential and vice presidential candidates, even though they're from opposite parties. Now that could be a great sign for reconciliation, or it could be a great strategy to be able to be in power so that they can then change what's happening in Kenya and never have to be actually convicted at the court. That's the cynical view. Hopefully that won't be the way it turns out.
All right, thank you everyone for coming. Go ahead and sign in if you haven't, and stay tuned for our future events. And thank you so much, Professor, for coming in this evening and talking to us.
Thank you all.